Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for the Web 2016 Business Leadership Series, Learn to Lead. Every year during Web, University Development organizes a lecture series featuring prominent business leaders and professionals. These individuals have been instrumental in shaping the business outlook within the kingdom and beyond. This year, we will be bringing to you 3 exciting speakers. Today is the first of our lecture series. Our guest speaker today is Mr. Banaja, Vice President for Corporate Communications, Marketing, and Corporate Social Responsibility for SEDCO Holding. Mr. Banaja has had a diverse career spanning across real estate, financial services, and consumer goods sectors. He's also served on various boards, among which a few prominent ones include Tasri, a SEDCO holding company focused on the casual dining market in the region, Okal, a non-profit organization aimed at bringing together young business entrepreneurs with angel investors. And he's also currently the deputy head of the Corporate Social Responsibility Committee for the Jeddah Chamber of Commerce. We are delighted to have Mr. Banaja with us today for the first of our lecture series. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Banaja.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'd like to thank Kaust and Hani for this wonderful invitation. It's actually maybe my 3rd time that I come and attend the WEP, but it's my first time speaking. It's also my first time speaking to a group of students who are, basically doing their masters and PhD. I've spoken to kids at the age of 10 to 12, so 4th to 6th graders. I've spoken to college students, and like I said, this is the first time I speak to this type of audience. And I've had some very interesting first-time experiences with each of the audiences that I present to. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story with the 4th to 6th graders that I presented to. The first question that I had, this first student raised his hand and said, and I was excited. I was teaching a financial literacy course and talking about money to kids. And I was really, really excited, and I said, wow, I have a question. So the student raised his hand and said, can I go to the bathroom? This was a 10-year-old, and it was the first time asking me. And then the second student, actually raised his hand. I'm like, okay, finally, I'm actually going to have a question from a student. And they said, when is the break? We would actually like to eat, okay? So I'm happy that you're actually all eating and all that. But I decided, instead of putting myself in my shoes, is to think about, if I was in your shoes, what are some of the questions that I might have? If I was a master's student or if I was a PhD student, obviously what's next in my journey is probably my career, okay? And what am I going to do with that career, okay? And I also thought, what are you studying here at Kaust, or what research are you doing, or what are you learning? And it's probably very, very focused on the area that you're specializing in, okay? So I said, what value can I kind of add to what you're already learning? I obviously cannot add much when it comes to science and technology or various subjects that you're learning. So I thought, let me give you a little bit about what I think is going to be important in the business world in the coming years, in the years to come, so that you're kind of prepared, okay? And I go back also to my college experience, and I say, did they really prepare me for the real world, okay? Did they really give me the skills that I needed for the real world? And I learned economics, I learned math, I learned science, I learned all of these different things. But they, I graduated actually in 98. Okay, in 98, okay, what was the internet like in 98? It was really nothing. Okay, I mean, there was Google that started probably in 98. There was Twitter and Facebook that started maybe 7, 8 years into my career. This is not something that they taught me about, when I was studying marketing. They didn't tell me that social media targeting is going to be the next big thing. So I didn't learn it in college. So I said, let me try and predict for you what are the things that are going to be important in the future. And these are not, I want to highlight specifically that these are not things that are today in organizations, okay? So I wish that these things are in organizations, and what I would like to do is equip you with things that I think are going to be around in the coming 5 to 10 years that are very important, important for your careers. I want to read for you something that somebody said. This is the second time I kind of give a version of this lecture, and this was said the day that I was giving my first lecture on this topic. Okay, so somebody said, today we launched a national program to introduce the curriculum of innovation and leadership in higher education in state and private universities. In collaboration with the University of Stanford, we will work to re-examine all higher education curriculum to keep pace with the state's policy of innovation, science, and leadership. The change of educational curricula and tools will ensure that we remain globally competitive during the next decade. So this is somebody thinking about 10 years from now. We must prepare for a time to come and not for today. The new generations require the skills of innovation, analysis, communication, and leadership, and public education will be a main focus of our national program. By the way, I'm going to give you a hint. This is a translation from another language, so if there's grammatical mistakes, it's because of the translation. Who do you think actually said this? Anybody have any idea who said this? Or the country that said this? Singapore? Any other guesses? I need 2 more guesses. Not Turkey, not Singapore. One more? Germany. No. No. This was, but close to home. Okay. This was Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, okay, in the UAE. All right. He said it, and this was, I think it was November 23rd. Okay. The day I was giving a lecture in an HR forum, and I'm like, wow, you know, he kind of said what I want to say about the future in 10 years, and he talked about communication, leadership, and you know, all of these wonderful skills. So this kind of gives you, you know, looking 10 years, do we actually have these things in our education system? This is not just saying that, you know, he wants to focus on these things, but this is saying that the education system today does not provide these things, and we need to relook at them. Okay? And I can tell you that if you go all around the world, I don't think necessarily they're focusing on some of the skills that are going forward. Definitely not in high schools, definitely not in undergrad. And that's why a lot of companies today that employ, their number one complaint is that the skills that are coming out of colleges is not the skills that we actually require. There are a lot more. And they're developing programs to go back and teach these skills to university students. So let's look at some of the things that are changing, okay, in the world that are impacting the work environment and impacting the competencies that we need for the future. Technology, without a doubt, changing tremendously rapidly. The amount of information, the speed that you get the information is just, you know, tremendous. When I was in college, I'm sounding a bit old when I say when I was in college, but the truth is when we do research, we used to go do research the classic way. There was no, there was no Google, there was no easy search, and I can find a topic. You used to go to a library and actually do research the old way. So technology has changed that a lot. Health has come a tremendous way. There's increased awareness. Okay, the increased awareness has led companies to change their entire business models. Okay, so today if you go and see McDonald's, okay, McDonald's is trying to basically move all of their McDonald's change to a more, you know, healthy type of environment with different types of meals. You know, so there's health awareness has changed even industries and companies. And there's increased life expectancy. So people are living longer. So that means that people have to retire at a later age. Okay, so what does that mean to competencies and work environment? But there's also a lot of increased stress. Okay, there's, you know, from a health perspective, people seem to be a lot more stressed out in their lives, and how can, you know, work environments actually try and fix that problem? And there's huge population growth. Okay, so today we're at 7 billion. we're going to reach 10 billion in the next 30 years. How do you, and what's the number of unemployment? I'll show you some of these figures of people that are entering into the workforce. In Saudi Arabia alone, we have 60% of the population under the age of 25, and all of these are going to be entering into the workforce in the coming years. And 2/3 of the employment is coming from which sector? It's coming from the government sector. Okay, so the government is the ones that are actually employing most of the people today are employed by the government. But if you have such a huge and massive number of students that are coming in, the government is no longer going to absorb these numbers. So what do they need to do? What do they need to equip themselves? What are the competencies that are important for them in the future? And the population growth has led a lot of whether it's government, whether it's companies, to think of solutions that are not just solutions that benefit them as a company or them as a country, but to benefit the entire world as a whole. So we've started hearing about, actually global goals have not been, it's not something new, but they've actually changed. Okay, they said we have to reevaluate the Millennium Goals, okay, and their new goals, and we're trying to find common solutions for all of these things. Some of the things that have changed in the work environment, okay, because of these rapid changes that are happening around the world, is we found that companies are basically increasing their tolerance. There's a huge population, that's out there. So they're having to be more tolerant towards things that are very, very different to them. Okay, so in Saudi Arabia, I used to, first job here in Saudi Arabia was, actually I was out, but then I came in 2000. Females were not around in the workforce. That was, for sure. Now I work in Red Sea Mall, and 40% of the retailers, okay, today, 40% of the employed retailers on cashiers today are actually female, because they either sell to females or in supermarket chains. The supermarket now there's a lot of females that are working there, and you have it not just in retail, but you have it in government. You have them working in all different sectors. But that tolerance is not just a Saudi thing, but all around the world. You see Walmart starting to integrate and have older generation. You have people who, or countries that used to be specifically focused on a typical race, okay, having other people coming in for diversity. And special needs is a very big thing as well, how we include them. So again, in Saudi Arabia, a law that unfortunately has not been enforced tremendously, but today there's a law about Saudization, and females count as 2 Saudis, just to make sure that they're actually in the workforce. Today, anybody with special needs counts as a Saudi with special needs counts towards 4, as if he's employed 4 Saudis just in the Saudization. So that means that we're going to have to be a lot more tolerant and diverse in our organizations. And obviously, in organizations, there's a lot more flexibility. So the talk in a lot of HR forums today is how do we implement flexi times? How do we be more flexible with timing? But how do we be more flexible also with people who want to work from different locations? Okay. I went to Riyadh a few months ago, and just getting to a meeting, okay, it took me 2 hours to get to the meeting and 2 hours back for a 1-hour meeting. So it was 4 hours of wasted time, and obviously that's due to population growth that's putting tremendous pressure on infrastructure, that's causing a lot of traffic. So now companies are saying, you know what, just stay home, work from home. It will reduce a lot of things. It will reduce time of your commute. It will make you stress-free. It will make you in a better work environment. And companies have started saying, you know what, not only will I tell you to work from home, I will come and set up your office and home so that I can teach you how to be more productive even from your house. So there's a lot of flexibility now in the workforce. So what does that mean? Changes in the world, changes in the work environment. What does that mean to you? Okay, I'm going to take this back. I don't want to show it right now. But if I were to ask you today, when you go into an interview, a job interview, what are the type of skills that you think that they'd be looking for when they ask you questions and they're interviewing you? Or even when you answer, an exam question or whatever it is, and the evaluator is reading these, what are the skills that they're looking for? Can anybody highlight some skills that we're looking for in individuals when we're trying to employ people? Not the same person that said Singapore and Turkey. Just kidding. But please. Your commitment. What else? Flexibility. What else? Your creativity. Anything else? Your communication skills. Definitely your communication skills. What else? I'm sure most of you, at master's or PhD, you've gone through a job experience, a work experience, and you've gone through some interviews as well. What else? And I'll give you some examples. Leadership skills. Do they look for your leadership skills? Do they look for your communication, you said? Do they look for your ability to work as a team? Have you not been asked the question of, have you ever been in a situation where you were in a team and blah, 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 and what was your role in that team, right? Okay. So all of these are skills that we hear about today, okay? Do you hear about negotiation skills? Were you ever, and again, a question in an typical interview, were you ever in a difficult situation with your boss, and how were you able to treat that situation and come out? That's your ability to negotiate and deal with different people and all of that. So those are the typical skills of today, okay, when you're being interviewed. But somebody who's looking for you, not only to basically be effective in today's new world, okay, but also effective 5, 10 years from now, will be looking for other skills. And these skills, and I wrote some of these down, okay. Cognitive load management, I'll talk a little bit about that. Virtual collaboration, transdisciplinary, okay, so that you have multiple disciplines. A generalist, a design mindset, sense making. Can you make sense of all the information that you have? Social intelligence, adaptive thinking, computational thinking, new media literacy, okay. These are competencies, okay, but you don't really hear them. But we actually require, somebody to be. So, for example, I told you about we said communication skills. Today, it's very unlikely that I'm going to sit today with Hani every time we meet. Okay, is going to be a face-to-face meeting, or with a group of students. It's highly unlikely that we're going to meet in a session like this every single time, okay? But it's very likely that we're going to have to be in different countries and be able to virtually collaborate. I'm going to have to teach an e-learning course, and that's the way of the future. Today we have a program where we go and give a classroom, and the classroom is 30 to 40 people, but I give the same online course and I get 5,000 students, okay? Amazing, okay? Because it drops the cost of education, and it's a completely different way, but some people don't know how to virtually collaborate. Some people are very, very successful, and we talked about an example, and by the way, I figured out that this is off record, okay, so this side of the room, correct me if I'm wrong, okay, this side of the room, I'm not on tape, okay, but we figured out some prominent businessman, okay, successful, very, very successful, okay, in every aspect of his life and his business and everything like that, failed in social media and the proper use of social media, and the next day, his world just came tumbling down. And I'll tell you a little bit more, but how many of you have heard about Subhi Batarji's WhatsApp? Okay, the video, it was a 20-second video, okay? 20 seconds, okay, that basically this guy who has built hospitals, has built pharmacies, is a successful businessman. It took him 20 seconds to record something and to say in that recording, please spread this. By the way, I'm off record, okay? I see people recording, but it's okay. But it took him 20 seconds, okay, to say, and please spread this to all of Saudi Arabia, okay? And he said this, please spread it to all of Saudi Arabia. And he did. And the reaction that he got from the population was extremely, extremely negative. and they called for a lot of things against him. Okay, they called for a lot of things against him that basically got his house and palace, there was a change in front of his road, okay, he had taken part of, or his palace had come out in front of the road and taken part of the road. They had to knock that down. There was a street that's named after him. A lot of people are saying, please change the name of the street, okay, he's no longer, one of us. There was basically a call for the stop of his IPO, which is in a few weeks actually, so it's like 30 days after the time he actually said this. My point is, okay, you could be very, very successful, okay, you could be very successful in your life, but if you don't master a skill like, social media, it could have devastating consequences. And some are public, okay, and some are less public and less drastic. But I've seen this again and again. This was an example of a businessman, but I've seen it also with, Hani Abu Ras, the mayor of Jeddah, okay. Right before the floods, imagine, he actually tweeted saying, farewell, bye-bye, okay. He was, fi amanillah, okay. So he said, fi amanillah, meaning, I'm leaving. And then the floods happened, okay. And that one tweet, so many people, but he was quick to react and things like that. But the floods of Jeddah, the people are not necessarily forgiving. And that was a problem with just social media and the use of social media. And I see a lot of people really misusing, especially the kids today. So I have 5 children, okay. One of my biggest worries is actually what they put on social media today, okay. One of the first things people do when an applicant comes to them is, what do we do? We go and we look at Twitter, if it's public or not. We look at Facebook just to see what the person kind of, get a general sense of that person. And I don't want my daughters to have pictures that later on in their lives is going to not help them get into a job because they did the wrong things in life, and my son, the same thing. So I think these are skills that are very important, and I'm going to talk to you about a few of them with live examples. I mentioned one example, but I'll mention another one. One of the important skills that I'm very passionate about is financial literacy, okay? And I highlighted this one on a separate page because I think financial literacy is something that will be able to help us going forward, so that students basically are no longer, your students are no longer a problem about, how do we employ these students? But rather these students are coming out of universities and creating businesses that are creating jobs, okay? So that you guys are actually, a fuel for the economy rather than this is a problem for the economy, how do we employ these students? However, the problem is that students who graduate college, okay, they go into the real world and they don't know how to start businesses, okay? They really don't know how to start businesses because they're very focused on the specific skill that they're learning in university. And those who do start their businesses, 80% of those businesses fail in the first 3 years, okay? So you start a business, you're a successful scientist and you want to, for example, let's say just start a pharmacy, just for simplicity's sake, start a pharmacy, and you know all of your medicines, you know everything about it, you know all the pharmaceutical companies, you know which medications to have, but you don't know how to be successful financially in terms of managing your cash flows, in terms of putting the right forecasts and all of these things. And the reason is in schools and in colleges, we don't teach our kids about money. We really don't, okay? And parents are afraid to talk to their kids about money as well. So you go all around the world, is there a subject in high school or in middle school or in elementary school or in college called financial literacy? And there isn't. And if you ask today, what is the most prominent language around the world? Okay, I like to say that it's not English, it's not Chinese, it's not It's not Arabic. It's the language of money. Okay, so if I go to Turkey, okay, and the guy doesn't speak Arabic, he doesn't speak English, you take out that money, okay, and you start talking to him about how much and cash and things like that. They understand that language, okay. If you go to France where they don't speak English to you, okay, it's the same thing. And if you go, okay, I've had the experience, so I'm talking first. But sorry for the stereotypes. But in reality, okay, all around the world, the language is the language of money, okay, is the point that I'm trying to make. And unfortunately, we don't learn it, okay. And we basically are actually, so people like myself, I'm head of marketing, so I also do marketing. I actually entice you to do a lot of the wrong behaviors, okay. I market to you products and services and make you want to travel with our travel agency and make you want to stay in our hotels and make you want to come to Red Sea Mall and spend all of your money. Okay, that's what I do, okay, for a living. And there's a lot of people like me. But there are not a lot of people who come and teach our kids about money so that when they're a kid, they learn planning, they learn budgeting, they learn savings, they learn investing, and they learn not to borrow incorrectly. Okay, so the economic crisis that happened, that impacted all of us in 2008 and 2007. There's a great film, by the way, that I just saw 2 weeks ago. It's called The Big Short, and it talks about the economic crisis that happened in the US and swept around the world. But basically what happened then is that people were just borrowing and borrowing and borrowing money, and the banks were just giving them and giving them and giving them and giving them money. And so many people lost their homes and lost their jobs and lost a lot of things. So without financial literacy, we're going to fall into a lot of bad habits, okay? And we're going to actually not be able to, so if you're going to start a business, you're not going to be successful if you don't have financial literacy and don't know how to plan and save and budget and all of these things for your future. And the governments are going to sit and worry about retirement age. So, oh my God, this guy is going to retire at 60 and I'm going to start to have to pay him, and there's social welfare and there's social security and all of these kinds of things. But if more and more people were financially literate, there would be businesses and people would be more successful going forward in the future. And even if you decide to take a job and you're not an entrepreneur and you're not a job creator, you need this in your personal life, like I said, and you need this in your business, okay? You need this in your job. Because I want to know that when somebody is managing the budget for that department in my company, he really knows or she really knows how to manage that budget for the department, okay? So financial literacy is another competency. So I urge you, I mean, this, and by the way, if you want a copy of this, I'm happy to leave it. These skills, if the person interviewing you does not necessarily bring these up, okay, I would just highlight it as if you have these skills, okay, or at least highlight some examples of things that you have within these skills. I'm glad that you said you're French, okay, because I have a good example that's coming up on France specifically.
Do you recommend?
Sorry?
Do you recommend any?
There are many, okay, for different age groups, but we have a course called Reali that you can take on an e-learning platform. It's great, but there are also books for kids that are very good, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Okay, there's The Richest Man in Babylon. There's so many different books, but I would say start with our course actually online. Okay, go to reali.com and you'll find our course, because we teach many different subjects on financial literacy. Reali. From Real, but my Real, so reali.com. Now, one of the things that pains me personally and really upsets me, okay, is that as the Muslim world, we have 1.74 billion Muslims around the world, okay, and they're obviously everywhere. We are 23% of the world's population, okay? But how much do you think in GDP we produce? So how much global goods and services do we produce in our country and develop in our country? If you added up all of the GDP of the entire world, and you say Muslims, how much do they produce? we're supposed to produce 23% of the global GDP that's all around there. But we actually only produce 2% of the GDP. We're actually amongst the poorest, okay, countries, okay, and the poorest religions around the world, okay? And we look at government to try and save us, okay, from this poverty and from all of these things. And I think it's really important that we start to say no, okay, and there's the famous quote of ask not what we can do for you, but ask what you can do for, you know. So I think we can all do something to start producing jobs and by starting to learn skills that we don't necessarily learn in universities so that we can become more productive in the world tomorrow. And this is an interesting one, okay? So if the world, the 7 billion was just broken down into the number 100, so let's suppose there are 100 people in the world. 48% of the 100 live on less than $2 US, okay? And again, the governments all say, oh my gosh, you know, these people are poor, how can we serve them, how can we help them, how can we do all of these things for them? But the reality is, you know, if you start actually educating them and giving them the right skills for tomorrow and the right competencies, they can actually be very, very productive for you. Now, I understand that these people, education is not necessarily number one on their agenda, okay? It's not number one on their agenda. Number one on their agenda is actually survival, okay, and actually eating. So what was really, really interesting, we went to some refugee camps, Syrian refugee camps in Jordan. A colleague of mine, and he came back with, he said, what are you talking about? You know, you want to teach financial literacy in the schools that are in these camps. These kids don't even want to go to these schools because their parents are actually sending them out to try and find food to eat, okay? So they're not going to come to schools. So the creative thing that the school did was they started providing food at school, okay? And we started paying for food, supporting food so that we can give them food, but in return for that food, all we wanted them to do was to get an education and to learn financial literacy and other life skills that can help them actually produce in their countries. I want to give you some examples of competencies that different people today use, and these are examples. So when the Paris massacre happened, okay, the king tweeted, okay, imagine the king of Saudi Arabia tweeting, okay. I didn't tweet, you know, except like a few months ago. The king tweeted, and he tweeted not only in Arabic, okay, not only in Arabic and English, but he tweeted in French as well. Because I think it's the only tweet on his account that's in French. But he, you know, him and the communication team or his advisors, whatever it is, realized that he's actually communicating with people in Paris and people in France. Okay, so let's tweet in French as well. And I asked, by the way, a French-speaking person, and they said the grammar is amazing. It's perfect. It's not a Google Translate. Okay, it's proper grammar. Okay, ministries today, okay, have not just have an account for the ministry, but they have an account for the minister as well. And this is the new kind of communication that is going forward today. Okay, and I deliberately kind of go and look at different ministries and ministers, and the ministers realize themselves that, you know, this minister is way advanced than I am because his ministry has an account, and he has a personal account, and he has 3 million or 4 million followers. So even the ministers themselves are starting to realize this is the way of the future. And guess what? These are people, what were they used to 10, 15 years ago in a country like Saudi Arabia? It was a desk job. I mean, it was really sitting behind the desk and, you know, waiting for the next meeting and the big and the signatures, and it was now it's very different. They're really with the people. It's a completely different skill set that you need to have. And I go back to the example of somebody using, you know, social media correctly, and somebody where social media can completely devastate what he built over the last 40 years. Like the successful businessman story that I told you. So there's a lot of new media literacy. There's a lot of adaptive, thinking. There's a new way of thinking that these people have to adapt to. And there's social intelligence. So, from a social perspective, I'm talking to people in France. I'm not going to tweet in Arabic. I'm going to tweet in their language, and I have to make sense of the world around me. And that there's a lot of skill in that, I would say. How many of you like Donald Trump? Like Donald Trump? Yeah. There's one person that likes. You like him, okay, and the rest don't like him. All right. It's interesting. Why do you like him, by the way? Okay, we'll have that conversation later. Okay, but Donald Trump, okay, this part of the world, okay, generally hates Donald Trump. Okay, he's doesn't want Muslims to enter into the U.S. But guess what? A lot of minorities hate him. Okay, really, really hate him. Okay, he's said a lot of bad things about the Mexicans. Okay, and he wants to shut off the borders, and he doesn't want them to come in. And he's called them, the drug dealers and this and that come into our country and take away. He said so many bad things. Okay, but he's also a very, very smart guy. Okay, he's very, very smart. Okay, so and he is going to be competing most likely in the presidential race. He's the leader in the Republican race, and Hillary Clinton is leading in the Democratic race. He's most likely going to go up against Hillary in the final Republican-Democratic race. So Hillary Clinton goes on Saturday Night Live. How many of you have watched Saturday Night Live? Okay. So few of you, how many of you know about Saturday Night Live? Okay. A lot of you know about Saturday Night Live. It's a very, very famous comedy show, okay, and it's been going on for years, okay, and so many celebrities have gone on Saturday Night Live, and it's on Saturday at night when a lot of people are sitting in front of their TVs, and it's a comedy, okay, it's all comical, and it's really, really funny, and Hillary Clinton goes on Saturday Night Live, and all of a sudden, everybody likes Hillary because she can be funny, and she can make fun of herself, and she can turn politics into a joking style, and her ratings go up. Okay, so Donald Trump says, "Oh, I have to go on Saturday Night Live." Okay, so he goes. He says, "I'm going to be on Saturday Night Live." Completely different effect. Okay, whereby people started protesting and saying. And he wanted to appeal to the minorities. People started saying, "You know what? Forget it. We don't even want you on the show." They started cutting Saturday Night Live, and people started boycotting. And they said to the station, "Stop this show. We don't want this guy on." And actually, a lot of jokes were about Donald Trump, as opposed to it turned out that a lot of jokes were about Trump instead of hosting him on the show. Now, this is a guy that, he understands. He understands that the polls has helped Hillary Clinton, and that for Hillary Clinton, that's basically understanding new media. She's more of a generalist. She can adapt to different audiences. She has many disciplines that she kind of understands. She makes sense. She has social intelligence. But Donald Trump, okay, didn't have that skill. And I think in the future, we have to think about those things. So even us, for example, as a company, let's say as a marketing guy, okay, let's say I have financial services company, I'm not necessarily going to appear in a magazine that is not helping my brand, okay? And this definitely helped Hillary's brand, okay, but it didn't help Donald Trump's brand. And I think people have to be aware of their positioning and their brand going forward when they enter into the workforce. This is, arguably one of the most brilliant people in business, okay, building the most successful companies. Okay. When he launched his first computer, this is a picture from his launch. How many of you have actually seen Jobs look like that? This is not his typical, okay, but this is, I think it was in late 80s, I'm not sure exactly when, but he's wearing a bow tie, he's wearing a suit, he's sitting down in front of a microphone with his computer, and he's actually talking to the media this way. Okay? And it's come a very, very long way. All right. Today, how does Apple appear with, and by the way, sorry, in this era, who do you think the Apple computer appealed to? Who was it designed for? Huh? It wasn't military. It was personal use, but for which target audience? I mean, it was really geeks, okay, and it was the design, people who were into design used to appeal to them. So he only had a very small market share, okay, and if I'm a general person, okay, just a student, and this guy came in and spoke to me about his computer and how fast it is and the font, how great it is and how it looks, I'm not going to listen to what he has to say, okay? He just is not appealing to me, okay? And he's not appealing to most of us. But Apple started to transform. And Apple, this is on stage in front of even more people. This is in front of the entire world, okay? He's sitting with the, another richest man in the world, or second richest man in the world, wearing sneakers, wearing a black t-shirt, smiling, laughing, joking, and things like that. That's when, okay, this guy, who really at the time only had a very good skill when it came to design mindset. He had a very good design mindset skill, but started to embrace new media and became more socially aware, became more socially acceptable amongst people. His brand and his appeal to the wider audience started to grow. So all these skills, I think, are very important going forward. In the beginning of your careers, okay, somebody might want you to do a specific task, and they might hire you because you know and have knowledge in the certain area that you're in, okay? And they'll position you in that. He's the scientist that's going to sit and do that, or he's the accountant that's going to sit and do the accounting. But as you grow in your career, okay, and as you progress in your companies, these are some of the skills that in 5-10 years are actually required for you to be leaders in those companies. For the sake of time, I'm going to speed up a little bit. But today, in SEDCO, we have 3 main categories of skills. We call them interaction, influence, and intelligence. We care, if you're interacting with people. We care if you're influential with others, and we care if you have a certain level of intelligence. Under each of these, and we call them the 3 I's, okay? And under each of these I's, we have the actual competency that we want to develop. So under interaction, we have communication, teamwork, customer service orientation. So all of these 3 mean that you have good interaction with people. If you have good communication, good teamwork, good customer service orientation. Some of the words are the same words that I kind of made fun of in the beginning when I said these are typical interview questions. They're going to check if your communication skills are good, if you have teamwork and all of that. And I told you, today most companies are still talking about the skills of the past. In influence, we want to understand if you know how to manage people, if you do negotiation skills, if you have strategic leadership. Sorry, strategic leadership is written twice, okay, and if you have strategic leadership. Under intelligence, we want to know if you're innovative and forward-thinking and have a kind of a design mindset. If you have individual leadership, if you can lead your life in a very good way as well, and if you have problem-solving skills. Now I think these 3 I's, okay, which is intelligence, interaction, and influence, will remain, but the other words that I kind of told you about, innovation, individual leadership, problem-solving, communication, teamwork, customer service, all of these are going to change to the other skills that I told you about, okay? In the next few years, people are going to start to understand, does this guy have the ability for sense making? Does he make sense out of all of the information? I told you technology has changed the world. Can he make sense of all of this information that's out there? Does he have social intelligence? Does he have adaptive thinking, or she have adaptive thinking? Does she have computational thinking, to be able to calculate matters? Do they have new media literacy? So all of these are skills that you have to, kind of build going forward. I know people today in organizations that they don't know how to use the computer, they don't know how to use social media, not the computer, but they don't know anything about social media. Now, if you were to tell me what's next, okay, a finance person to raise funding for a business used to know how to go to a bank and write a business proposal and write a business plan and do a forecast. In the future, how are people seeking money for their businesses? Completely new skill. There's something called crowdfunding. Today I can put it on a website and ask people to come and fund this business, and they would be the first people to get these products. So skills are really, really changing. So I'd like you to think more about these skills and also what's beyond these skills that you're actually not learning in your everyday student life. Okay. Now, in addition to competencies, I want to talk to you about just a couple of other things and we'll wrap up. One is the importance of work-life balance. Okay. And this is more for companies than it is for you guys. But I think in general, what we tend to have is much shorter attention spans. Okay. My kids, I cannot hold a conversation with them for more than 20 seconds. So literally, okay. They're on their phones all the time. It's just, and companies need to be aware of that, okay? They cannot get the attention span of their employees for long periods of time. So what can they actually do in their work environment to actually change that? Yeah. And I think some of the solutions will come from the employees themselves. Learning, has to be fun, and gamification is a nice way where the education system has changed the way we get educated because there's low attention span, and introduced gamification into the schooling system. So how does gamification come into the workplace? I don't know, but it's something that will evolve in the future. And the importance of menu of benefits to choose from. You're going to see a lot of companies going forward, instead of saying you have to come from 8 to 5 and take a 1 hour break, and this is your salary, and this is your bonus, and this is that, and this is this is. They're going to say, what do you want? Okay. And they're going to say, okay, so you're willing to take less salary, but work fewer hours and longer vacation times, work from home and take a lower bonus or whatever it is. Companies are starting to do that today, and they want to see that you're also flexible in these kinds of situations. Lastly, I think one of the things that is changing tremendously is that there is a sense of growing responsibility amongst everybody. Okay, there's this growing sense of responsibility amongst companies, amongst people, and amongst government, because there's huge population growth, which is leading to scarcity and problems and things like that. And companies are starting to think, we actually have to be closer to the employee. Okay, we actually have to be closer to the employee and show them that we have a good health-life balance in our organization. When you get interviewed, it's very important for you guys also. It's not just about the company interviewing you to understand what your competencies are, but you ask the company if their work environment is right for you, and if they actually care about the employee. Say, what are you giving me? And don't ask about the salary, okay, but ask about, what kind of life-work balance do you actually offer in this organization. We, for example, have a lot of health programs in our organization, okay. We encourage people to take the stairs, we provide, I don't know what was in your white bag, but we provide green apples, okay, for a healthy lifestyle. In Ramadan, we have weight loss tips, because people tend to overeat in Ramadan. And we actually donate money for those who actually lose the most amount of weight to people who are poor. And we have a lot of, things that show that we care about your health and provide a balance. A lot of employees today are also want to be closer to the community. They want to volunteer. Okay, they want to say it's not just about coming to this job and doing the job, but it's also, I'm part of this community. What else do you have? And we have companies have a lot of volunteering activities. So we go out to the community, we do this, we do that for them. We go to schools, we teach, we educate financial literacy as a volunteering program. So ask these companies, what are you doing in terms of being closer to the community and also closer to the environment. You should ask the companies, how responsible are you towards your environment? Okay, and do you have measures in place that measures, your impact on, the carbon footprint if you're a factory or in your offices, usage of water and paper and electricity? Do you have these programs? And sometimes it's not going to be you asking these questions, okay? Sometimes it's going to be the company has these values, has a social responsibility value, and they're going to ask you, they're going to say, how much do you care about the environment? You say, and if you answer, I never really thought about it, okay? That's not going to go well in an interview, okay? They actually want people that have the same values as them. So I talked maybe a little bit about some of the things that we do at SEDCO, but the role now of competencies and making sure that the organization takes care of its people and has the right competencies within an organization is no longer the role of HR. Okay. It's actually the role of many functions within the organization. It's the role of HR, it's the role of corporate communication, because they're the ones that are going to build these skills in people and help see them through. It's the role of the corporate social responsibility department. It's the role of the IT department. Okay, and these functions are no longer support functions. They are core functions in the organization to bring great talent into the organization. So you might be, you might want to come and work in a specific function, but guess what? The IT guy might come and interview you and see if you have some of these skills that we just talked about, or the CSR guy might come and corporate social responsibility might come and see how responsible are you? Do you really care if you're sitting and printing thousands of paper and killing the environment? So these are some important skills. I've wrapped up. I mean, I put this picture up, and I have a few 4 or 5 pictures that I'm just going to run through. But we take these things seriously. We take the competencies seriously as an organization. At SEDCO, this is just employees across our organization. We're a very diversified group. We just recently got the 8th best place to work in Saudi Arabia amongst a lot of different companies. And I think it's because we focus on all of these competencies. We try to employ the right people into the organization and give them and empower them with the right tools. And I'll just say a couple words on each picture. This is our CEO giving out a trophy to the football team that won in the football tournament, where we have 400 students, and now we have the employees and their kids coming and participating in this tournament. He not only gives out the award, but the CEOs now of the past are no longer there. He actually plays in these tournaments and plays football, and we actually join. So the CEO role is instrumental in creating that new environment. So this is him, and these are other CEOs in the company that are playing with these students. So future leaders are having to be closer and closer to their environment. This is just some team working and team building exercises that we kind of do and show the picture. And somebody asked me about transparency. This is a forum that we have every quarter. This is a CEO report that we do every quarter, and sit with the people, talk to them about the financial results, talk to them about all of the things that are going on in the company. And I think employees are more and more are realizing that transparency is important in organizations, and we have to have that skill. It's very different than the past, where the CEO would sit behind his desk, okay, and you would not know what's going on as an employee. We, in fact, worked together in an organization. I remember the management team were on the floor by themselves. Okay, the world is changing rapidly, and it's going to change a lot more. And this is, in fact, is our chairman. We have a lot of fun, different activities. So with that, thank you for listening. And I'll leave the floor open for any questions. I probably left little time for questions, but that's okay.
Thank you so much. Wonderful speech, very informative. And you're definitely going to make me think twice before I send that WhatsApp message. So we'll open it up for questions. We have a few minutes. Any questions? Hold on, honey.
One of competencies you've mentioned that I need to develop in myself, what would be the best means? Is it just practice, or is there a different?
You know, I think it also depends on where you are at your career, okay? So, you know, in your level, I think practice, obviously, but there's also probably formal trainings as well. But for students who don't necessarily have the skills, and I tell this maybe to the younger students, I see a lot of students wanting to take internships, okay? And they want to learn on the job, but their main focus on learning in the job is actually how much do I get paid, you know, for my internship. And I say, listen, if you have to pay for this internship, okay, it's an opportunity for you to learn these specific skills. So internship is a great way to actually, you know, go into an organization, really identify what skills you're weak in, because a lot of people think they're good at everything, and put together a development plan for you, working with a mentor to develop some of these skills. So there are many ways, but internship is something in addition to the formal training that you mentioned.
Any other question? Mary Laura, I see a question.
My personal career goal, interesting, okay. First of all, the number that I put up there, okay, is, I'm going to put career aside for a second, and I'm going to talk about a personal goal that I really like to achieve. We have a program in our organization called Riyali that I mentioned, okay, and it pains me to see that, you know, the 22% Muslims around the world are actually, you know, producing the lowest GDP. So I love to go and teach students, you know, financial literacy, to try and get them to actually be more aware of money and financial literacy, and start saving and start investing and things like that. So that's why I really enjoy going out, and I haven't necessarily put numbers in front of everything, but I hate seeing the number 23% of the world control 2%. Okay, I just hate that number. Okay, control. If I have any place to play in trying to kind of raise that number from 2% to a higher level, then it would be great. And I think, you know, from a career perspective, and going back to work-life balance, if I have a job that actually helps me do that, okay, then it will be great, okay. And SEDCO actually helps me do that, because they have the program, they have the funding, and they're a very diversified business, okay. So that is important, that the organization allows me to continue to do that. And I'm a person that gets bored, okay, to be honest. I get very bored if I'm in one specific area. The SEDCO business kind of has diversified businesses, so we have hotels, we have restaurants, we have this, we have that. It allows me to jump from one thing to another. For the last 20 years, I've never held a job for more than 3 years, and with SEDCO I'm there for 5 years. So I see myself growing with them as an organization, and maybe it's because there's also, you know, they kind of do the same thing that I have passion in, which is teaching this financial literacy. And maybe, since I didn't see hands, I'll end with a small story. Okay, at a time when I had, if you allow me, maybe we have 2 minutes, I'll tell 2 quick stories. One is about my kids. Okay, when my kids were, or 3 of my kids were 12, 10, and 8. We went to the mall in Dubai, and I said to my kids, each of you have 100 dirhams. We went into Virgin Megastore, and you get to buy whatever you want for 100 dirhams. This was a time when I was just starting financial literacy courses and things like that. 20 minutes later, they couldn't make up their minds. Obviously, they wanted everything in the store, okay? And they came back, and I'm like, yalla, we have to leave this place. And then I gave them an ultimatum. I said, you have 5 minutes. You have to decide, okay? Another 5 minutes in the store. and they came to me, all three of them, and it's as if they were up to something, okay? So my daughter, my eldest daughter, who's 12 years old, said, okay, we have to ask you a question. I said, well, what's that question? She said, I asked the middle daughter, my middle daughter, okay, so Tala asked Aya if she can borrow some of her money. Okay, so she has 100, but she found something for 120 or 150, whatever it was. She wants to borrow from her 50 to buy something that she clearly cannot afford, okay? So I didn't know what to say. I looked at Aya, I said, did you agree to lend her the money? And she said, yeah, I'm okay with it, but I can see that she wasn't really happy about lending her that money. I said, okay, if you guys agree, all right, then I have no problem. And I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing, because what I'm teaching my eldest daughter is basically, you know what, if you don't have the money, you can always borrow. Okay, really bad lesson, okay? But at the same time, I was teaching my middle daughter to be very generous, okay? If somebody, family, friends want some help, you can help them out and give them money. And my middle daughter said, okay, I'm gonna lend her the money, and she spent whatever the rest of the money. My son, okay, who was 8 years old at the time, said, I found something and it's 30 dirhams, but I have a question. What's the question? He said, if I only spend 30 dirhams, are you gonna give me the 70 dirhams change, okay? So he's already thinking about how do I save and collect money and all of that. So very different mindsets. So as we're going back in the car, so that's a lesson in itself. As we're going back in the car, my son is sitting behind me, and all of a sudden I feel his hands on my shoulders, and he's massaging me, and I said, wow, Faris, that's really amazing, it's really nice. And then all of a sudden he stops. I'm like, why did you stop? So he said, Baba, if I continue to massage you until we get home, will you give me another 50 dirhams, okay? So look at the mindset of kids, okay? And we want more of, we want more of all of them. I love them all to death. But we want the mindset of how do I make money, how do I be generous, okay, and how I don't borrow correctly. And the second story, much faster, is my first experience teaching girls in Saudi Arabia, females in Saudi Arabia at college. I asked a question, I said, how many of you want to work after college? And I didn't realize the question that I just asked, okay? And how many do you think raised their hand? All of them raised their hand, okay? And one of them started mocking me, okay? Literally, she's like, why would you ask such a stupid question, okay? So I said, well, it's not really a stupid question, because if I asked this question 10 years ago, that's not the answer that I would have gotten, okay? Maybe 50% of it, but here's a lesson to you girls, okay? All of you want to work, okay? How do you differentiate yourselves against all of the competition that you now have in this room? What skill sets you apart from the girl that's sitting next to you, from the one that's sitting behind you, so they realized, oh my God, I have to work. The education is not going to be enough, but I have to equip myself with other competencies and other skills so that I'm more competitive than everybody else in this room. And by the way, I'm also a female, okay, that I'm competing with a lot of males who are in the workforce, so we're considered kind of a minority in the society that are entering into the workforce. So that makes you think a little bit about competencies and skills that you need for tomorrow. So I don't know how we're doing on time, but
We're almost out of time, but if there's still one or two questions, all right.
First of all, thank you very much for the amazing presentation. You've spoken today about so many important skills in the workforce for us, students and workers. But the question that I'm asking you, if there is a topic in science, you can read about it easily and buy books. So I still ask the same question. What is the best way to develop myself in these kind of competencies?
in all of these competencies,
Yes.
like I said, I don't think, first of all, I don't believe books are your only solution, okay? Maybe, students, and specifically students in science and technology, and sorry if I'm kind of generalizing, but maybe we're used to books, okay? I don't think you learn real-world skills through books, okay?
The rest of us are waiting for you to start a Twitter account and tweet this information.
I really think that you learn real-life skills in, in life, okay? Not necessarily in books. You can read so many books, you can read so many articles, but you have to experience them. So even if you're, I talked about internship, but what jobs are you working part-time while you're, while you're here, okay? What things are you trying to develop? By the way, I read a very, very interesting chart on some of the biggest businesses around the world, and you look at how much money they needed for funding. They needed nothing, okay? They literally needed, some of them started, the biggest companies like Walmart, I don't know, Amazon, this, that, they start with $500 saving, $2,000 this, in the back of the garage this, and they build the greatest businesses. And these people did it while they were studying. They didn't learn the skills from the books, trust me, they learned it by, working and actually experiencing them firsthand.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Banaja.